Hi, welcome everyone. We're so glad that you could join us today to hear about state strategies to support paid teacher residency programs. And we're excited that there's so much interest in residencies. We'll begin with a brief research presentation to share what we've learned from our work in California and Texas. And then we'll have some awesome panelists joining us today to share their learnings and perspectives. We won't have time for a separate Q&A portion, but please chat any questions or comments you have. We'll be incorporating questions that come through the chat, as well as questions that you all submitted through the Zoom registration into our panel discussion. Then after the panel, we'll have a few minutes for reflections from the California Commission on Teacher Credentialing, and then we'll close. And with that, it's my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Jennifer Bland, who will be sharing research findings from our research on California and Texas teacher residencies.
Great. Thanks, Kathy, for the introduction. And hi, everyone. I'm really pleased to be kicking us off today with some background on research findings related to high-quality paid teacher residency programs and the state strategies that support them. So first, why residencies? Data from a range of recent or ongoing studies, both internal and external to LPI, show numerous promising residency outcomes in California and/or Texas, as indicated by the icons on the left side of the slide. First, research reveals that residencies are no longer a boutique teacher prep strategy in either state, with approximately 10% of teacher prep program completers in California and around 8% in Texas now coming through the residency route. Studies also show higher levels of racial diversity among residency versus non-residency trained teacher candidates, higher retention rates for residency versus non-residency trained teachers once they become teachers of record, more substantial learning gains for students of residency versus non-residency trained teachers, higher initial teaching performance assessment passage rates, and higher satisfaction ratings for their prep programs by residency alumni. I'd be remiss if I didn't shout out colleagues working on some of these studies, including researchers at WestEd, Texas Tech, the Education Policy Initiative at Carolina, and Texas State. Appreciation as well to the Texas Education Agency and the California Commission on Teacher Credentialing for making rich data sets available. With all these promising findings, it's highly relevant to explore the features of strong residencies that contribute to these outcomes. To quickly level set, research converges around a set of features that high-quality residencies share. Starting in the dark blue puzzle piece, these features include a full-year clinical teaching placement in the classroom of an experienced mentor teacher who's been trained for the role, with progressively increasing responsibilities for the resident as the year goes on. Coursework at the Ed Prep program, or EPP, is tightly integrated with clinical practice, and the EPP has a close relationship with each local education agency, or LEA, where residents are placed to co-design the program and monitor resident progress. The paid element of the residency can help resolve financial barriers to quality preparation. To essentially get under the hood and better understand how these features support strong residency outcomes, our LPI research team conducted 8 case studies of high-quality residencies in California and Texas. There were some important sources of variation across the 8 sites, as you can see in the text on the right, and all this variation enabled us to analyze residency structures and strategies with pretty broad applicability to programs in a range of contexts. So I'll spend the remainder of this presentation focusing on how our findings relate to state policy strategies in California and Texas that can be replicated elsewhere to help develop, implement, and sustain paid teacher residencies. These include setting requirements for EPP LEA partnership development as part of residency grant programs, making such grants available for capacity building and/or program continuation, much of the funding from which supports candidate stipends or scholarships, support for strategic staffing efforts, which can help LEAs reallocate funds towards resident stipends, offering technical assistance for residency implementation, and formalizing or codifying residency features in state policy. Across the 2 states, one of our most key findings was the elevated importance of robust EPP LEA partnerships in making really all of the other elements of a high-quality residency work, both in terms of operations and financing. And colleagues at WestEd and the National Center for Teacher Residencies have collectively identified 5 key levers for developing strong and sustainable EPP LEA residency partnerships. creating and operationalizing a shared vision, identifying key roles, ensuring time and space to collaborate, sharing data, and securing financial commitments from both partners. One aspect we identified in our own work as key to residency development in both states is that policymakers introduced some of these elements of strong partnerships as requirements to receive state residency grant funding. For example, laying out expectations for the frequency of shared EPP-LEA governance meetings. Providing state grant funding for residencies, including competitive grant programs in both states, as well as brand new formula funding in Texas, is a major leverage point that states can use to support residency development and help EPP and LEA partners build towards sustainability. In Texas, for example, the T-Class Residency Grant Program, a competitive grant introduced in 2021, provided around $78 million for resident and mentor stipends and nearly $13 million for technical assistance to help LEAs build towards sustainably funding these stipends past the grant's end in 2024. More recently, HB2, an omnibus education finance package just recently passed by the Texas legislature, includes ongoing dollars for LEAs to fund resident and mentor teacher stipends, as well as funding for EPPs to support residency operations, with the EPP funds contingent on residency alumni retention in the teaching profession. In California, policymakers have allocated over $740 million since 2018, specifically to support the planning, launching, and expansion of residencies, including $70 million newly allocated for 2025 in this year's state budget. Funding supports 3 different types of competitive grants: capacity grants to plan new residency programs, implementation grants to start them, and expansion grants to expand existing residency programs. $20 million have also been set aside for residency technical assistance, which I'll touch on a little later. One of the most substantial residency expenses is resident stipends, which ranged anywhere from around $11,000 to $37,000 per resident per year across our case study sites. To fund stipends, the large majority of LEAs we studied initially drew on state-allocated district dollars from competitive grant programs like those I just mentioned. Some EPPs also contributed federal funding to augment stipends. External funding can be especially important for LEAs new to residency partnerships, since it takes time for LEAs to determine how to sustainably reallocate their own funds to support residency stipends and other expenses. LEA funds can be reallocated from several sources, including quite commonly through a process some EPPs and LEAs refer to as strategic staffing, which I'll expand on in just a moment. Of course, another important residency component for funding is scholarships. Different states have different policies. For example, the Golden State Teacher Grant Program in California, which is available to, but not limited to, residents. As promised, to provide more detail about strategic staffing, it basically redistributes district funds that were previously allocated most commonly for instructional support staff by having residents take on some of these responsibilities on a part-time basis. For example, a resident might take on a part-time sub, paraeducator, or tutoring role in the LEA, saving the LEA money they would have spent paying an outside sub, para, or tutor to help offset the cost of this resident's stipend. In this example, for certain days of the week, Resident A spends the morning in their mentor teacher's classroom and the afternoon in a paraprofessional role floating between classrooms 1, 2, and 3, while Resident B spends the morning in the floating para role across classrooms 2, 3, and 4, and the afternoon in their mentor teacher's classroom. However strategic staffing is structured, the residents are spending the majority of their time as residents in their mentor teacher's classrooms. Also key to building out teacher residency programs, Texas and California have each leaned heavily into technical assistance, or TA, as a key lever for program sustainability. In Texas, as part of T-Class in 2021, money was set aside for TA specifically on developing strategic staffing models. This was provided by US Prep, a national organization that's done a lot of work supporting residencies through university school partnerships. And TA took 2 forms. US Prep provided some TA directly to LEAs, and to build towards sustainability, the state had US Prep work with Texas's regional education service centers in a train-the-trainer context, with the service centers now equipped to deliver this TA directly to new LEAs. California has a statewide Residency Technical Assistance Center, or ESSER-TAC, which is emphasizing sustainability in its 2025-26 offerings. To meet the different needs of residency programs in diverse contexts and at different stages of implementation, ESSER-TAC this year will be facilitating communities of practice and statewide networks, as well as structured learning opportunities through power-ups and a deep dive series. And finally, both states have started to codify elements of high-quality residency implementation into state policy, for example, by making changes to aspects of education code. Texas is an especially interesting case to highlight here because of the way aspects of residency development have been systematically sequenced. In Texas, state support for residency development began with several smaller pilots, and then the 2021 T-Class investment supercharged state support for residency implementation. Subsequently, policymakers incorporated research-based residency best practices into state administrative code. For example, by creating a new enhanced standard certificate for residency completers that signals their rigorous preparation to future employers. Finally, with the passage of HB 2 earlier this year, legislators allocated ongoing funding for residency program operations, including stipends as well as EPP expenses. This sequencing of policy developments was something we found to be very successful in supporting residency development in Texas and worthy of replicating in other states. With that, thank you so much for your time and attention on what was admittedly a whirlwind trip through state policy strategies to support teacher residencies. And I'll pass it back to Kathy to introduce our panel.
Thank you, Jen. And just a reminder to the audience, we will be sending out a follow-up email with all of the resources that have been shared in the chat. Just keep an eye out for that. So thanks, Jen, for sharing those state strategies from California and Texas. And now I'd like to move right into our panel discussion. We have an amazing lineup today, including Cheryl Holcomb-McCoy, President and CEO of the American Association for Colleges for Teacher Education, or AACTE. Sarah Beal, Executive Director of the University School Partnerships for the Renewal of Educator Preparation, or USPrep. PK Diffenbaugh, Superintendent of the Monterey Peninsula Unified School District. Rigel Massaro, Deputy Legal Counsel and Deputy Policy Director for the California State Board of Education. And Clifton Tanabe, Dean of the College of Education at the University of Texas at El Paso. Cheryl, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Kathy. Really, and I want to just thank the entire LPI team for this collaboration. It's always a pleasure for us at AACTE to partner with our colleagues such as LPI to bring new knowledge and knowledge to our shared communities. So really happy to be here. I'm also really excited to moderate this important discussion, which will build on Jennifer's presentation. We'll hear from expert voices from California and Texas, two states that have invested in teacher residencies to bolster and enhance the teacher pipeline. Each panelist will have approximately 3.5 minutes to respond to questions, allowing us to gather a diverse range of insights. And I'm sure you have many questions, so please don't forget, if you hear something, to put your questions in the chat, and we'll try hard to possibly integrate those questions into our discussions. So with that, let's get started. And I'm going to start with Rigel to hear why California has prioritized residencies. And Rigel, how are you today?
I'm great. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you, Cheryl, and thank you, LPI.
Great. So we heard about some of the investments that California has made in developing, launching, and implementing teacher residencies. Why has the state prioritized residencies? What is the why here?
I think everyone on this call knows that teacher preparation is very diverse. And in California, from our vantage point, I think this is widely shared in Sacramento, residency is the gold standard because it prepares teachers to succeed in the classroom and to stay in the classroom. It prepares diverse teachers to succeed and stay in the classroom. And so it's for that reason that that incredible investment, $740 million, has been made over the past several years. And it's consistent with our state's overall focus on earn and learn pathways, recognizing that, for years we've normed earn and learn in the medical profession, recognizing that you can't prepare someone to be a doctor without them having hands-on experience treating patients. And the same is for teaching. Teaching is, Dr. Linda Darling-Hammond said the other day, literacy is, and I believe teaching is, rocket science. And so giving candidates the opportunity of months, not, we have 600 hours required of clinical practice for all preparation. For residency, it tends to be 800 and above. And that is of folks in classrooms and shadowing a seasoned mentor teacher. And so we like everyone, are facing this teacher shortage, and we want to invest in it in a way that isn't just going to support the leaky bucket of attrition into and out of the classroom. And so we have seen, as Jennifer mentioned, we have seen early returns in terms of a much more diverse workforce coming out of residency, higher pass rates on our performance assessments, and longer attrition in the classroom. We've thought about apprenticeship recently as a way to build upon and sustain residency programs. And really, just want to reiterate, we're thinking of this as, folks need to earn a wage to come into teaching and to come into any profession these days. And we've seen the success and draw of intern programs in our state, and we've wanted to invest in something that's going to hold them and their success more than other pathways do. So that's why really California has doubled down on residencies.
Great. That's really important, and really basing a priority on what really works and being true to that. I want to go to Clifton now, because this kind of builds on what you were saying, Rigel. So California made changes based on the true why and the rationale, but how did policies change? And can you talk, Clifton, a little bit about how did the policy context in Texas support UTEP, your universities, your School of Education, College of Education, in developing and implementing residency partnerships? What were the policy implications here?
Yeah, thank you so much, Cheryl, for the question. Rigel, I love that quote from Linda Darling-Hammond. Teaching is a complex, performance-based profession, and our preparation programs truly need to rise to that level of training. While we were somewhat early, Cheryl, I think, in the kind of developing our partnership structure in El Paso and at UTEP, I think it's fair to say that conversations about new teacher residency models had been emerging in our region and across the state of Texas, even as we launched our model in 2019. Clearly, policymakers in Texas were beginning to learn about and ask questions about teacher residency. And over that time period, I was invited to the state legislature several times to provide expert testimony on the work we were doing in El Paso. So things were bubbling up. We kind of rode that wave in some ways. In responding to the emphasis of your question, Cheryl, I think on partnerships, let me say that carefully designing an elegant teacher residency program with the right curriculum and clinical features is a powerful first step. And in my experience, truly the success of our residency program has included that, but been grounded in the intentional community-wide partnership structure that we built to support the teacher pipeline in our region. It's really important to drive that work through a network of committed partners, of course, including incredible district-wide leaders. I'll say just a little bit about that context, our context. In El Paso, about 70% of the current teacher workforce, that's over 11,000 teachers spread throughout our region. 70% of that workforce is trained, graduates through the College of Education that I lead. And those teachers and educators prepare, love, educate the students that make up about 85% of the entire UTEP student body. So this is a unique educational closed loop. The context allows a very clear level of responsibility for all of us involved in preparing students for success. It supports a culture of partnership, so we've certainly been a part of that. And we've had incredible partners at the district level, philanthropic and community level. So all of that goes into this equation. Lastly, let me just say that sustained and trusted partnership is earned. And ultimately, those partnerships must be mutually beneficial. They must be in constant communication. You got to be able to make tough decisions around a shared table. We work very intentionally in doing that through multiple different structures that align with policy all the way up. So I'll just say that's part of our kind of magic sauce has been in building those partnerships and in demonstrating together with our partners success and showing that on a regular basis. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later, I think, in my next question.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's wonderful to hear that the state and the district leaders and the university EPPs working together. It sounds fantastic. And that's what, we all know it works. And so trying to get that done and having a context in which there's a lot of support. I want to talk more about this because this is still building the story a little bit here. And Sarah, I'm going to come to you next because as we think about partnerships, as we the priority, the why, and then what do states need? I mean, what's the technical assistance piece? Because you've been in that space. Can you just explain a little bit about the technical assistance that played out in the residency partnerships in Texas and why technical assistance was so important as the next phase of the story around the success of residencies in Texas?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Cheryl. Well, in US Prep, we've had the opportunity and privilege to provide technical assistance in both the residency and then in the last couple of years, strategic staffing, as Dr. Blair mentioned earlier. And for the residency, we started with just 2 Texas programs in November 2015, so nearly 10 years ago. And then over the course of the last 10 years have added 3 to 4 more programs each subsequent year. We did our best to ensure that we were elevating and amplifying the work in real time, sharing the outcomes, and what resulted was that more institutions joined US Prep and the momentum built. Today, there are actually 20 educator prep programs across Texas engaging in this work with US Prep. That collective effort, alongside the advocacy of programs and their district partners, we believe really helped lead to the statewide policy change. So last year, as it was noted earlier, the Texas residency route was approved. And then just several months ago, House Bill 2, which has about $400 million in allotments for teacher preparation. So a real kind of ground up grassroots approach. And so in US Prep, we actually have 10 years of experience working alongside programs to make the shift to residency. And that experience really allows us to help educator prep programs set a clear vision and move to execution, we would say much faster than if they were doing it on their own. And the support that we provide, we believe offers a roadmap and then on the ground coaching needed to turn ideas into action. So as we all know, residency requires fundamental shifts in how preparation programs and school districts operate. So the technical assistance we use guides partners in taking steps such as redesigning clinical experiences and coursework so they are fully aligned to residency structures, developing deep reciprocal partnerships with schools and districts to ensure that shared ownership, selecting and training mentor teachers who are prepared to guide residents effectively, and embedding strong coaches. We call them in US Prep site coordinators who serve as faculty. They teach courses, they observe those residents in the classrooms, and then they are sharing data both at the district level and with faculty to really inform improvement. One of the key things I think in US Prep that we've really leveraged is supporting leaders receiving technical assistance and support from other coalition members. So you heard Dean Tanabe in their early years of a residency, UTEP is part of US Prep. there are many times when we go to a learning tour or bring people to UTEP to see the work in action. I saw another comment from Wes in the chat. We hosted a Fort Worth learning tour several years ago where people came and heard about Tarleton and the work of their district partners. The idea is to amplify and elevate these practices where leaders are not feeling isolated or hesitant to take risks on their own, but they're surrounded with other leaders who are taking on this work. And so they use each other as a resource and learn from one another. That's a big part of what technical assistance looks like for us as well. And so in our work, when we first start working with an educator prep program, we begin with a pilot, a small cohort of residents, and then intentionally scale over several years. And so this phased approach allows us for effective change management, gives faculty the time and space to fully engage and take ownership of the shifts. And then through technical assistance, partnerships gain the structure and accountability and that real-time problem solving needed to move the work from concept to sustainable practice. And then for strategic staffing, as Jen noted earlier, we were able to pilot actually with UTEP and one of their school district partners, Socorro ISD. We launched a pilot of strategic staffing for residency in that district. That first year, they had 30 paid residents sustainably. Residents were serving some roles in those schools. And the state took notice at that time, and it ended up being that we received a Texas Education Agency grant to codify that technical assistance, and then we were able to train the education service centers across Texas so that they were positioned to support local EPPs and LEAs and scale paid residencies across the state.
That's great. I mean, there are lots of, I'm sure folks want to even know more. As I was listening as a former dean, it was like, so how did the teacher, how does the technical assistants, are those faculty members, the folks coming in to do that? Just a really quick question for clarification.
Yes.
Are they considered faculty on campus once they get there?
The technical assistance team?
Uh-huh.
They're US prep coaches, but yes, a lot of
Okay.
times, and I would look at, Dean Tanabe right now, a lot of we want faculty to see those coaches as part of their team, as part of their faculty, where they forget who they work for.
Okay, great information. Love that idea. Now, this is where the real results come. PK, I'm turning to you as our district leader. You get the teachers that are coming out of these teacher residencies. Tell us a little bit about how you would describe the new teachers who are prepared through teacher residencies compared to other pathways. This is a tricky question, but
Sure.
but this is where the rubber meets the road. So how do you see new teachers coming out of teacher residencies?
Yeah, thank you for the question, then the opportunity. So we're in our seventh cohort of residents, and each year we survey our principals around the effectiveness of our residents compared to other pipelines that we have, whether it's our local California State University, alternative pathways such as interns, et cetera. And consistently, our residents are rated significantly higher than our other pipelines. So that's speaks to the effectiveness in the classroom. I do want to emphasize they're still beginning teachers, right? So they are still struggling like any beginning teacher. This is not a magic bullet that suddenly, they do a 1-year residency and you can expect that they would have this experience of a 10-year veteran. But they are really much more prepared than any other pipeline that we have because of the time that they've had under a mentor teacher, the experiences over takeover weeks and takeover days where they are really in the classroom by themselves, getting that experience and then getting feedback. So they're much more in terms of excellence. For us, though, we had multiple metrics that we wanted to judge the effectiveness of our residency. So effective teachers obviously was one and is paramount. But we did the residency also because we wanted to diversify our teacher force. Like many districts, we have about 80% students of color. And the inverse is true for our teaching profession, about 80% non-teachers of color. And so our residency program and our cohorts have consistently been between 55 and 80% prospective teachers of color. And many of them went through our schools and are from our community and already know our kids because they were already working, whether it had been as a paraeducator, after school coordinator, etc. And so that was another huge metric of success for us, is that it's slowly we are becoming more and more reflective of our student population as we have more and more cohorts come through. And then the third would be teacher retention. So we have a turnover challenge. We live in a very expensive part of our state. We lose probably around 20% of our teachers every year, which is about 80 teacher hires every single year. And we really wanted to have a high retention pathway. And that's our residency, I think, because they are more prepared, because many are coming from our community and already have ties and roots and connections here. We found that our residents stay is a 2-to-1 margin. We still do have some slippage in terms of retention, but they stay. If we now have 7 cohorts, so we've tracked our residents, 6 years out versus the other hires that we did that same year, and the percentage is twice as much in terms of retention as our other pathways. So that's another way in which we are measuring the success of our residency programs. So all those together, I would say this is not, everyone looks for the silver bullets. This is not a silver bullet. This is a lot of work to put this into place. It takes a huge amount of investment, not just financially, but the time it takes to work with your Institute of Higher Education to pull this off. But it is well worth it, not just for excellence in the classroom, but also for diversity of your teachers and retention. There's multiple measures that we've had that has showed the success of our residency program.
It's wonderful to hear just the good news and the success and the hard work pays off, it sounds like. It really does. I want to go back. We're going to do another round really quickly. And I know that we could be here for a long time, but we have to quickly, I don't want to run out of time. So just another quick round of questions. Rigel, I want to start with you. Listening to PK talk about, describing the kinds of teachers and the success that he's had, it really does require a comprehensive, high quality preparation program. In California, rolling out the state level investments and ensuring the high quality across all residency programs, what really happened in those programs, and what are some of the next steps for the state in terms of ensuring or maintaining, sustaining that quality? And are there any lessons learned? That's a lot of questions. So Rigel, try to get
you said quick, like 4
as
times.
succinctly as possible. We just want to know, how are you going to maintain and sustain these high quality programs?
So starting with our state statute that governs how these hundreds of millions are going out to LEAs, their IHE partners. There's a strong focus on mentorship, which is such a key component, right? There's a focus on compensation, which is critical. So we know it's a minimum in California of $25,000, and many LEAs are nearly doubling that. I hear frequently of a $40,000 stipend. And that is time bound. So this year the focus is really on sustainability. Just a few more pieces around the statute. The question was asked in the chat around high need areas, STEM fields, and special education. Those are prioritized in our statute and in the funding that the Commission on Teacher Credentialing has distributed to the field. The statute also requires that not only residency programs get their candidates to a preliminary credential, but that they also provide the support, which we call induction in California, for individuals to clear their credential in the LEA where they're prepared and where they are working, and in a cohort. And all of these are research proven methodologies for the strong preparation and the retention of our residents, while honoring like that cohort approach is particularly supportive and critical for diverse candidates. So then the commission took that statutory framework and even strengthened it further in the request for applications, which requires, PK mentioned those surveys. That's a required component, getting continuous feedback to support continuous improvement of your residency program. That really tight coordination between the LEA and the IHE, streamlining coursework and field work, tracking completion rates, retention rates, and really getting into the nitty-gritty again around that mentorship piece. So California's also invested in having a statewide residency technical assistance center that is led by one of our county offices and supported by 4 others to cover our large geographic area. And so they just revamped their 10 characteristics of effective residency programs. They have multiple forums. LEA, they're tracking how their assistance is helpful. LEAs and IHEs report that regional support is particularly helpful. And this year their focus is sustainability. So we're thinking about how do we leverage things like apprenticeship, student teacher stipends, external resources, leveraging induction resources to kind of cover these gaps. And we don't have the perfect answer yet, but this is the focus for our programs and our technical assistance center, as well as for the legislature and the governor. We want these programs that have rooted to stay rooted, to grow roots, and to continue to spread throughout the state.
That's great. And, I'm following up with Sarah, same question, but about strategic staffing. What key steps or lessons learned or practices to making the most of strategic staffing in Texas?
Yeah. Well, strategic staffing models they're only effective if they're deeply intentional and grounded in partnership, which I think is like such a theme of this today in residency. And so a couple of key practices when you think about strategic staffing models. The first is that both the districts and the educator prep programs need to go into this work. I think PK may have said this earlier, need to go into this work recognizing that this is a long-term teacher preparation pipeline strategy. It's not necessarily the answer to an immediate fix with teacher shortages. It's a long-term strategy. In essence, going in with the mentality that we are going to ultimately, over time, really change our hiring practices and our long-term goals. We believe strongly, just like Jen shared earlier, the data that shows the value of residency during the residency year. We have a lot of data that shows that they really add value during the residency year, that student achievement goes up, as well as the residency impact outcome. So how effective they are in their first years of teaching. We have a lot of data that also shows that they are not only effective in their first year of teaching, but they get better much faster as well. And then they have high levels of retention. And so that, exposing districts to that data also allows them to think strategically about, that long-term strategy of training and hiring. And then when we're designing strategic staffing models for residents, we start with designing for mutual benefit. So how do we design staffing models that meet the school's staffing needs, and at the same time design those staffing models so that they don't jeopardize the training and coaching they receive in their residency? So the idea here is that the roles that the residents can play will likely, and we have seen, support their development in greater ways. And it's important to think about what roles can they play in instructional needs in schools so that they don't jeopardize their training and take them away and outside of their classroom with mentor for too long. So some of these roles, and I think Jen shared these earlier, is like substitute teachers, maybe 1 day a week or 8 hours a week, tutors before and after school, or acceleration during the school day, sharing paraprofessional responsibilities. We've seen a lot of collapsing vacancies and promoting highly effective teachers to serve as those mentors and teacher leaders, and putting residents in those classrooms. And so I think this was also shared earlier too, that there's an opportunity to consider multiple funding sources. So we have reallocation from those roles that candidates play. So if they are substitute teaching 1 day a week, how are we reallocating our substitute teaching dollars to go to the resident? We have reinvestment, which I think is that long-term strategy. I probably PK is doing a lot of that, where they know that this is a longer-term investment, that if we get these teachers and they're staying, we'll have to spend less on hiring new teachers and professional development and that teacher turnover later. And then there's opportunities for grow your own. So I think, Rigel said this earlier too, like if there's maybe funding from apprenticeships and other funding that might be supported through grow your own. So ultimately, I think making the most of these models means treating staffing not as a workaround, but as a deliberate strategy for transforming both the preparation of teachers and the instructional capacity of the schools.
Great. And I'm going to continue with this financial investment piece, and PK, go to you. I mean, what type, strong partnerships and strategic staffing approaches require some type of an investment from district partners. Can you just give us a brief, summary of the resources that your district, Monterey Peninsula, invested in your residency partnership with Alder?
Yeah, absolutely. So we started with a partnership prior to the grants that were going out from the state of California. So we started with a $15,000 per resident living stipend. We also, for hard to staff positions such as special ed or mathematics or science, we offer a $10,000 a year tuition reimbursement program. And then we pay our mentors $5,000 a year to be mentors. And then we contribute towards our coordinator as well. So in all, it's probably about a $500,000 investment if you're talking about a cohort of 20 or so. And that was before the grants. But we were afforded the opportunity with the local control accountability plan. You have freedom to meet your local needs. And clearly one of our needs was high turnover, and that was addressed by our parents who were advocating for us to do better. And so this was one strategy we put in place through our local control accountability plan. The grants allowed us really to expand and allow for a stipend up to about $45,000. So we maintained our $15,000 and then added the grant on top of that. And really what that did was increase the number of applicants and increase some of the applicants who were in our system who just couldn't apply when it was 15, ended up applying. So these are your paraeducators, your after-school aides, your site supervisors. They just couldn't go without a living wage really for a year, even though there's different loans and stuff. And so the grant really allowed us to open that up, and we got a lot more applicants as a result of that. But the initial investment will continue post-grant, but we will have to adjust the stipend in order to continue to sustain.
Thanks, PK. That's that's such helpful data. And I'm going to move now to Clifton. You're going to bring us home with this and give us a sense of how did you engage with Texas policymakers to make all of this happen? What would you say are some of the key critical data components that you need to collect, monitor, establish the proof points to make that compelling case for this continued investment? I mean, listening to what PK said, I mean, the investment is huge and significant. Policymakers have to come along with you on this. So how did you make your case in Texas?
Yeah, I think this is such an important question and perspective really to think about and to continuously address. I mean, there's storytelling that needs to be part of this. You have to have good data. You've got to be able to demonstrate it on a variety of levels. One thing that I said repeatedly when I was testifying, and BK, I think maybe you touched on this a bit, is, a third grade teacher can teach third grade that first year, maybe not do that great a job, and they'll have a second shot at maybe the second year. The third graders in their classroom that first year only have one shot at third grade. So we got to train these teachers so that they're, basically day one ready. Of course, there's additional things that they need to do in their development, but we have data, as Sarah was alluding to, I think that was beginning to show that that's really the outcome here. One way I think about the essence of this question is to understand and demonstrate the value or the return on the investment that states like Texas are making in teacher residency. Additionally, I want to say that in our experience, the same attention to demonstrating value is required in growing and sustaining our partnerships with ISDs and other community-based partners. Lastly, I found that showing value through data, through storytelling, is also fundamentally important in maintaining the buy-in and enthusiasm for this work at my own institution here at UTEP. Toward that end, we work intentionally to share data with all of our partners and with university leadership, faculty and staff in the college. Understanding and showing data is central to how we sustain our work and residency model and begin to show that so that our policymakers can understand the work that we're doing and the impact that it's having. Just from a little bit more in the weeds, some large data point buckets we work to track, share, and use to inform our decisions are related to performance. So, for example, in terms of teacher evaluation outcomes, that's T-tests here in Texas, we track those scores through residency and into career. Our first cohort and now our second and third cohorts are performing on their T-test exams at a rate that outperforms all other non-residency based programs in school districts compared one-to-one. The exciting part of that data is that in year 2, residency students seem to widen that gap. So they're getting better, faster on job. Another bucket is related to workforce in terms of retention outcomes and filling vacancies, and especially vacancies in rural school districts. So here I want to share one short story. I was attending a region-wide meeting for superintendents. We call it the RAC here in El Paso. And at that meeting, one of the superintendents, we were just talking a little bit about some of the teacher vacancy structures that we were building out. And one of the superintendents from a rural school district said, I want everybody around this table to know that our model for addressing vacancy is the residency model with UTEP. And I'm proud to say, she said in this meeting, that as of this year, we think we have solved our vacancy problem. We have 0 vacancies this year in a rural district where that's almost
unheard
impossible.
of.
So very exciting there. So some of the more emerging and absolutely critical data elements we're working to collect and to understand are related to student growth. So bottom line, if the work we're doing in teacher residency at UTEP doesn't work to improve the educational outcomes and experiences for K-12 students, schools in our region, then we need to figure out what does. So along those lines, I'll say one incredibly powerful way to get policymakers to understand what we're doing is folks like PK. We need district leaders. Their voice in our policy efforts are fundamentally important. Tell the truth. What are we doing? How's it working? What do we need? And that's been our motto. And I'll give a shout out to Sarah, who's led so much of that work for us and helped us on the data front. She'll know that when we first got together, all I talked about was data. We need data. So that's been really an incredible part of the work we've been doing. Thank you.
What an outstanding story. And that I saw lots of our participants had lots of balloons going on that. So all that good news. Hey, I'm going to do a quick round and I want you to finish this one statement. If I could do it all over again, I would blank. And this is trying to just get to lessons learned. Who wants to go first? Try to keep it to 1 word or 2 words. Who wants to go first?
In legislation, I would require our residency programs to engage with our technical assistants. The vast majority do, and we don't have 100%. And I think that's key to really maximizing the impact of these investments.
Great. Who wants to go next? If I could do it all over again, I would.
If I could do it all over again, I think I would increase the stipends earlier to make it more possible for more of our target applicants to apply, because we really saw that once we did that through the grant that we received from the state of California, it really made a huge difference.
Great. If I could do it all over again, I would Sarah, Clifton?
I mean, this is a hard one. I feel like we've had so much success in Texas. Like I don't think I could 10 years ago dream that we'd be in this place. And so I think if I could do it all over again, some of the things that we started early on, and I think Jen said this earlier, is that residency doesn't have to be boutique and it can be scaled and sustained, but it does require real huge shifts in a college of ed. And you've heard Dean Tanabe talk about they were willing to reallocate a lot of resources to fund full-time faculty in schools. And in turn, schools felt like they were part of the partnership, and that work has continued to be sustained. So I would say continue the stories, continue to elevate and amplify the importance of the partnership. And I loved how he charged us all with like stories like PK, getting the districts out in front to tell the story of why this is different and why it's so important.
All right, Clifton, one word. No one listened to me before with the one word or two words. So
Double down on scaling partnership throughout the region over and over.
there you go. Still, but anyway,
15 words.
as teachers, we get over it as long as there's learning and it's good news. Thank you all, panelists, for such a thoughtful and insightful conversation. I'm going to turn it over now and introduce our discussant, Adam Ibrahim, who is the Chief Deputy Director of the California Commission on Teacher Credentialing. Adam, considering what you've heard today from our research overview, Jennifer's research overview, and the panel discussion, where do you see your organization heading in terms of supporting and scaling residencies in the future? Turning it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Cheryl. It's been such a joy to just sit back off camera and listen to you all go. This has been just fantastic. And thank you to the research team at LPI and to the panelists. Where we're headed, it kind of reminds me of where I started, which is coming into the teaching profession on an emergency permit with a great mentor, but no discernible structure, coursework online at night after kids were asleep, and none of it fit together. I think Rigel had a similar entry to the profession, if I'm not mistaken, and that experience stuck with me, and it taught me how costly accidental preparation is, and not just for candidates but for schools and students. I mean, so I think just listening to these conversations and reading the research across both California and Texas, it points to the same direction, and I hope Clifton and Sarah, I hope you'll indulge me. It's that a box of gears ain't necessarily a clock, right? There requires, a certain level of intentionality and design when bringing all these pieces together. But when partnerships are strong and when the coursework, clinical practice, and mentoring are aligned, when candidates are intentionally supported and prepared, they do better and they stay longer, and school communities enjoy the benefits. And preparation works when the pieces are built as a system, not just fragments. So at the commission, kind of what are we thinking? Where are we going from here? I would say, first is we're attending to the core work of residencies, and we're doing that by not lowering standards to address workforce challenges. PK, I hope this resonates, but we are holding firm on quality, and at the same time, we're interrogating our own systems, right? So we're asking ourselves, how do these discrete requirements that we put in preparation pathways actually contribute or detract from readiness in real classrooms? And simultaneously for our program partners, how does the enormous amount of labor of accreditation that we require, how does that or does that not improve quality, or is it just reinforcing compliance? So recent legislation gave us cause and occasion to revisit these things fundamentally, and we have massive shifts coming to our performance assessment system, which we're rebuilding from the ground up, to our examinations, which we're repositioning as options among many options without lowering standards. And we're putting our accreditation system up on the rack. So the first thing is we are holding the line on quality to keep the work that residency surrounds intact. Second, the $70 million is in the budget. There's a reinvestment alongside that investment in California, and the state has really put its money where its mouth is. It is invested and reinvested about $130 million for future residencies. And the commission is committed to making those investments durable, and we're focused on that. And that means building infrastructure to sustain them, both real infrastructure, looking at a grant management system, better data systems, better communication systems, which are all sort of included. And that's also building durable partnerships. And I don't want to get ahead of my chair, Dr. Marquita Grenishire, who's going to be announcing, some work that we're doing. But suffice to say, the commission is going to be anchoring data exchange, agency collaboration, and program innovation for the foreseeable, so that we could see that these investments endure. Right. So the third, and this is kind of germane to how Rigel and I entered the profession, and how many people do enter the profession. It's we're focused on how the lessons of residencies can reach further. So the reality is that many candidates can't even step into the profession without a real living wage. That's just the base. That's the facts. So if we want to bring them in, the pathway has to do two things at once: provide strong support and demand real quality. We are approaching apprenticeship and the design of apprenticeship slowly, admittedly, with this in mind. And we're doing so in a way that is going to provide clear expectations for the field. At the same time, creating flexibility in the design of registered apprenticeships with our partners in state labor agencies, so that they can be used to solidify and sustain residencies, and also be used to address some of the high churn entry points, like through emergency permits and other places where we know that we're just losing a lot of folks unnecessarily. So that's the third piece. So I'd say in closing, this is an exciting time for us, and we are really focused on making sure that we hold the line on quality, and that we are investing in partnerships, and that we're making sure that these investments are durable. And we look forward to continuing to partner with Learning Policy Institute, our friends at the State Board of Education, our friends that are close to the point of instruction, close to the point of program implementation, to learn those lessons from the people that are experiencing the implications of policy shifts we're making at the state level. And I'll even say it, we're looking forward to continuing to stay in pace with our colleagues in Texas, and hopefully still learn from one another, and share stories and share data. And that's what I have. And so, thank you for the opportunity to be here, and pass it back to you, Kathy.
Thank you, Adam. Thanks for those insightful reflections on the future directions for California. I'll be excited to see what's to come and to follow the work in California. Thank you again to our amazing panelists, PK, Clifton, Sarah, Rigel. Thank you so much for being here, and for our moderator, Cheryl. Thank you again and again for sharing your perspectives and for making the time to be here today. As a reminder, we'll send out a follow-up email with links to resources, the slides, and the webinar recording. And please take a minute or two to respond to the event survey. We really do take your feedback seriously and use it to plan future events. Thank you all for joining us today. We appreciate you. We appreciate the work you do every day for teachers, children, and families. Thank you. Bye-bye.